The room smells like leather and steel. 9:17 a.m. That's what the timestamp reads on every screen mounted along the walnut-paneled walls. The executive boardroom of Halcyon Systems Group sits on the 42nd floor, bulletproof glass, stretching floor to ceiling, offering a view of the city that makes people feel small before they even walk inside. 3 American flags stand in perfect alignment behind the head of the table. The air conditioning hums at exactly 68 degrees. Everything here is controlled, measured, designed to remind visitors that power doesn't negotiate. Grayson Hale sits at the center of it all. He's 53, silver hair combed back sharp enough to cut, wearing a suit that costs more than most people earn in 6 months. His hands rest flat on the table, fingers spread wide like he's claiming territory. Around him, 12 senior engineers stand frozen, staring at monitors that show nothing but failure. Red indicators blink across every display. The system they've been demonstrating for the past 2 hours, an energy control unit designed for mobile military command bases, has crashed again. Federal observers line the back wall, clipboards held against their chests, faces blank. A colonel with a prosthetic leg shifts his weight, jaw tight. Nobody speaks. The silence stretches so long it starts to hurt. Hale exhales slowly through his nose. "Explain it to me again," he says, voice low and controlled. "Explain how 3 teams of engineers, people I pay more in a year than most families see in a decade, can't fix a system we've been selling to the Department of Defense for 6 years. One of the engineers, a man in his 40s with sweat forming at his hairline, clears his throat. "Sir, we've run every diagnostic. The compensator keeps overloading during the stabilization sequence. I didn't ask for a diagnosis," Hale cuts in. "I asked for a solution." The engineer's mouth closes. Hale leans back in his chair, fingers drumming once against the armrest. His eyes move across the room, scanning faces, reading fear like it's a language he learned young. He built Halcyon from nothing, turned government contracts into a billion-dollar empire, climbed every ladder by stepping on the people below. Gratitude isn't part of his vocabulary. Results are, and right now, there are none. This unit was supposed to keep soldiers alive in the field. Hale continues, voice rising just enough to echo. Power during blackouts, climate control in hostile environments, communications when everything else goes dark. Lives depend on this. Billions of dollars depend on this. And you're telling me it doesn't work. The room stays silent. Hale's gaze shifts toward the corner, and that's when he notices them. A woman stands near the service entrance, half hidden behind a cleaning cart. She's wearing a gray uniform, gloves tucked into the waistband of her pants. Her name tag reads Rosa. Beside her, pressed close to the wall, is a girl, maybe 12, maybe 13, hair pulled back in a ponytail that looks like it was done in a hurry. She's wearing jeans and a hoodie, sneakers that have seen too many miles. Her hands hang at her sides, but her eyes are locked on the machine. Not on the people. Not on the billionaire sitting 10 feet away. On the machine. Hale's chair scrapes against the floor as he stands. "Why?" he says slowly, pointing toward the corner. "Is there a child in my war room?" Rosa steps forward immediately, hands up like she's surrendering. "Mr. Hale." "Sir, my name is Rosa Delgado. I clean this floor. My daughter, she had nowhere to wait. I thought." "You thought wrong." Hale's tone doesn't rise. It doesn't need to. "Security. Remove them." A man in a dark suit moves toward the door. And that's when the girl speaks. "You're going to burn out the compensator in 38 seconds. Her voice is quiet, calm, like she's reading a weather report. Every head in the room turns. Hale freezes mid-gesture, hand still raised. The engineers stare. The federal observers lean forward. The colonel's eyes narrow. Rosa grabs her daughter's arm, whispering fast in Spanish. "Noemi, no. Por favor, no, Hables." But Noemi doesn't stop. She takes one step forward, eyes still on the machine, and her voice stays steady. "The feedback loop is wrong. You stacked a correction protocol on top of a safety dampener. It's fighting itself. Every time the system tries to stabilize, the compensator has to work harder. Eventually, it overheats. That's why it keeps failing. One of the senior engineers, a man with wire-rimmed glasses and 20 years of experience printed on his badge, lets out a short, nervous laugh. That's not possible. That configuration was approved by our entire design team. It's been in use for years. Noemi doesn't look at him. Her gaze stays locked on the monitor. Then your design team made a mistake years ago. The room goes completely still. Hale's face shifts. The anger drains, replaced by something sharper. Curiosity. Calculation. He steps around the table slowly, hands sliding into his pockets, and walks toward Noemi until he's standing directly in front of her. Rosa pulls her daughter back, but Noemi doesn't move. Hale crouches down, bringing himself to eye level. Up close, his smile is cold, practiced. The kind of expression people use when they're about to enjoy something cruel. "You think you can fix it?" he asks softly. Noemi doesn't answer right away. She glances at her mother, then back at Hale. Yes, Hale's smile widens. He stands slowly, brushing invisible dust off his sleeves, and turns to address the room. "Gentlemen, we have a volunteer." His voice carries now, theatrical, like he's narrating a show. This young lady believes she can solve a problem that has stumped 3 engineering teams and cost us millions in delays. Murmurs ripple through the engineers. The federal observers shift. The colonel watches without blinking. Hale turns back to Noemi, and his voice drops to a whisper that somehow fills the entire room. "Fix it," he says, "and I'll give you $100 million. Gasps echo across the boardroom. Rosa's hand flies to her mouth. One of the engineers drops his tablet. Even the federal observers blink in surprise. Hale doesn't blink. He straightens his tie, lets the silence stretch, and then adds the rest. "But if you touch that system and you're wrong," he continues, voice still soft, still deadly, "you and your mother are both gone, blacklisted, no job, no reference, no second chances." Rosa's breathing quickens. She pulls Noemi back harder now, whispering urgently, "We're leaving, right now." But Noemi's eyes don't leave the machine, because she's seen this before. Not here, not in this boardroom, but she's seen this exact flaw, this exact failure, this exact mistake. Her father taught her how to see it. And Grayson Hale has no idea what he just walked into. Have you ever been underestimated so completely that people forgot you were even in the room? The system fails at 9:21. Exactly 4 minutes after Grayson Hale made his offer. Exactly 38 seconds after Noemi Delgado predicted it would. The monitors flash red in perfect unison. A low hum vibrates through the floor as the energy control unit shuts down for the 6th time that morning. Engineers rush forward, fingers flying across keyboards, voices overlapping in technical jargon that doesn't mean anything anymore because the machine is dead again. The colonel with the prosthetic leg closes his eyes. His hand grips the edge of the table so hard his knuckles go white. One of the federal observers makes a note on his clipboard, the pen scratching loud enough to hear over the ventilation system. Nobody celebrates. Nobody panics. They've been here before. This is what failure sounds like when billions of dollars are watching. Hale doesn't move from where he's standing. His eyes stay locked on Noemi, studying her the way a surgeon studies an incision. Rosa has both hands on her daughter's shoulders now, pulling her backward toward the service entrance, whispering prayers under her breath. But Noemi's feet don't move. She's counting something in her head, lips moving silently, eyes tracking the screens. One of the engineers, a younger man with a Halcyon Systems badge clipped to his belt, slams his hand against the console. It's the same fault line, same thermal spike, same cascade failure. "Reset the sequence." Another engineer calls out, "Run the backup protocol." "We've run the backup protocol 11 times. Then run it again." The room fills with noise. Commands shouted across monitors, keyboards clicking, the hum of machines rebooting. But underneath it all, there's something else, something nobody wants to name out loud. Fear. Because this system isn't just a product. It's a promise. A promise made to soldiers deployed in places where power means survival. Where climate control is the difference between heat stroke and operational readiness, where communication blackouts get people killed. Halcyon Systems built its empire on that promise. Grayson Hale became a billionaire by standing in front of Congress and swearing his technology would protect American lives. And for 6 years, it's been failing. Not in boardrooms, not in front of investors. In the field, the colonel knows this. That's why his jaw stays clenched. That's why his hand won't let go of the table. He's seen what happens when a generator dies in 120-degree heat. He's held the radio while medics tried to save someone whose cooling system stopped working. He signed paperwork that erased names from rosters because equipment failed and backup never came. Hale knows this too. He just doesn't care the same way. Rosa's voice breaks through the noise, sharp and desperate. We're leaving. Now. Noemi. Vámonos. But Noemi pulls away from her mother's grip. Not hard, not disrespectful, just firm. She takes 3 steps toward the console, and every engineer in the room turns to watch. One of them moves to block her path, but Hale raises a hand. Let her look, he says. Rosa's breath catches. Mr. Hale, please. She's a child. She doesn't. She made a prediction, Hale interrupts, voice smooth as glass. And she was right. So let her look. Noemi stops in front of the main display. The screen shows a diagnostic readout, lines of code scrolling too fast for most people to follow. She doesn't touch anything, doesn't ask questions, just reads. Her eyes move left to right, top to bottom, scanning the data like she's searching for something specific. The engineers watch her with expressions caught between curiosity and contempt. One of them, the man with wire-rimmed glasses, crosses his arms and mutters under his breath. This is insane. Another engineer, older, gray-beard, 20-year tenure pin on his lapel, steps closer to Hale. Sir, with all due respect, we can't let an unauthorized individual access classified defense technology. The Federal Observers, Hale says quietly, are here because we've failed 6 demonstrations in a row. If she can fix what you can't, I don't care if she's unauthorized. The older engineer opens his mouth, then closes it. Noemi's finger hovers over the screen, tracing a line of code without touching the glass. There, she says softly. That's where it loops back on itself. One of the younger engineers leans in, squinting at the display. That's the stabilization subroutine. It's been in the system since version 2.0. I know, Noemi replies. That's the problem. The room goes quiet again. Not the tense silence from before. This is different. This is the sound of people realizing they might have missed something obvious. Hale moves closer, hands still in his pockets, expression unreadable. Explain it, he says. Noemi doesn't look at him. She keeps her eyes on the screen, voice steady and clear. The stabilization subroutine is trying to correct fluctuations in real time. But you also have a safety dampener running in parallel. Every time the stabilizer adjusts, the dampener overrides it. Then the stabilizer compensates for the override. Then the dampener compensates for the compensation. They're locked in a feedback loop. The compensator is the only thing absorbing the excess energy, so it overheats. Once it burns out, the whole system crashes. Nobody speaks. The older engineer steps forward, eyes narrowed. If that were true, we would have caught it during alpha testing. You did, Noemi says quietly. Someone caught it. Someone flagged it. But it got buried. The air in the room shifts. Hale's expression doesn't change, but something flickers behind his eyes. Just for a second. Just long enough for Rosa to see it. She knows that look. She's cleaned these floors for 3 years. She's emptied trash cans full of shredded reports. She's wiped down desks where emails were deleted in the middle of the night. She's vacuumed boardrooms where men spoke in whispers about things that never made it into official records. She knows what buried means. And she knows her daughter just said it out loud. The colonel stands slowly, prosthetic leg scraping against the floor. He walks toward the console, eyes fixed on the screen. Who flagged it? He asks. His voice is rough, worn down by years of smoke and sand, and shouting over helicopter blades. Noemi hesitates. For the first time since she started speaking, Her confidence wavers. She glances at her mother, and Rosa's face goes pale. Because Rosa knows the answer, and she knows what happens to people who speak that name in this building. Hale's smile returns, slow and sharp. He tilts his head, studying Noemi like she's a puzzle he's starting to enjoy. Go ahead, he says softly. Tell them, who flagged it? Noemi's hands curl into fists at her sides, and the system, still dead on every monitor, waits in silence. What would you risk to speak a truth that powerful people spent years trying to erase? Rosa's hand closes around Noemi's wrist. Not rough, not angry, just firm enough to pull her daughter back one step, then another, away from the console and the monitors, and the men staring like they've just seen something impossible. Noemi doesn't resist. She lets herself be moved, but her eyes stay locked on the screens, reading data that scrolls past too fast for anyone else to track. The engineers haven't moved. They're frozen in place, caught between disbelief and the slow, creeping realization that maybe this girl standing in a hoodie and worn sneakers just identified a flaw they've spent 6 years ignoring. Grayson Hale watches it all like he's sitting in a theater. He's not angry anymore. Anger is loud, reactive, inefficient. What crosses his face now is something colder, calculation. The look of a man who's built an empire by knowing exactly when to push and when to wait. He takes one step closer to Noemi and Rosa, hands still in his pockets, posture relaxed in a way that makes the threat even sharper. You didn't answer the Colonel's question, Hale says quietly. Who flagged the flaw? Rosa's grip tightens. She knows where this is going. She's been in rooms like this before, not as a participant, never as someone who matters, but as a shadow. Someone who empties trash cans and wipes down surfaces and hears things people assume don't register. She's learned how power works in places like halcyon systems. It doesn't ask questions because it wants answers. It asks because it wants to see who flinches. Noemi's voice comes out steady. My father. The words land like a stone dropped into still water. Ripples spread across the room. The older engineer with the gray beard takes a half step back. The younger ones exchange glances. The federal observers lean forward, pens poised over clipboards. The Colonel's eyes narrow, and his hand moves to the edge of the table again, gripping hard. Hale doesn't react, not visibly, but his shoulders shift just slightly, and his smile fades into something harder to read. Your father, he repeats slowly, like he's tasting the words. Yes, Noemi says. Arturo Delgado. He worked here as a contract technician, field systems specialist. He flagged the feedback loop 5 years ago. He wrote reports. He filed warnings. He sent emails to 3 different departments. The room goes so quiet that the ventilation system sounds like wind. Rosa's breathing quickens. She tries to pull Noemi back again, but her daughter plants her feet. Not defiant, just immovable, like she's decided something. And once Noemi Delgado decides, the world has to adjust around her. One of the engineers, the man with wire-rimmed glasses, clears his throat. I don't recall any reports from a contractor named Delgado. You wouldn't, Noemi replies. They were buried. Hale's expression flickers. Just for a second. Just long enough for the Colonel to catch it. And the Colonel has spent 30 years reading men like Grayson Hale. Men who smile at press conferences and cut corners in back rooms. Men who shake hands with generals while signing contracts that put profit over protection. He's seen the type before. Hell, he's worked for the type before. And he knows what buried means in a place like this. It means someone told the truth, and the truth was expensive, so it disappeared. Hale takes another step forward, and now he's standing close enough that Rosa could reach out and touch him if she wanted. But she doesn't. She pulls Noemi back one more time, positioning herself between her daughter and the billionaire who just offered $100 million and a threat in the same breath. Let me make sure I understand, Hale says, voice soft and precise. Your father, Arturo Delgado, worked here as a contractor, filed reports about a flaw in a system that's been operational for 6 years, and those reports were, as you claim, buried. Yes, Noemi says. And you know this because he told me. Before he died. The room shifts again. Not movement, not sound. Just the weight of something heavy settling into place. Rosa's eyes close. Her lips move in a silent prayer, and her hand trembles where it rests on Noemi's shoulder. She doesn't want to be here. She doesn't want her daughter speaking these words in front of these people. She doesn't want to remember the last 2 years, the hospital bills, the collection notices, the veterans' hotline that never called back, the funeral they couldn't afford. She doesn't want Grayson Hale to know any of it. But Noemi keeps talking. He got sick 3 years after he left Halcyon, she says. Exposure-related illness, lungs, kidneys, liver. The VA denied his benefits twice. He died 16 months ago. But before he did, he made sure I understood the systems he worked on. He made sure I knew what he tried to fix. And he made sure I knew who stopped him. Hale's face is unreadable now, smooth, blank, like someone pulled a curtain across a window. But the Colonel's isn't. The Colonel's jaw tightens. His hand releases the table, and he takes one slow step toward Hale. You buried a safety report from a veteran contractor? I don't recall, Hale says evenly. Any reports from anyone named Delgado. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. The federal observers are writing now. Fast. Pens scratching across paper, filling margins with notes that will end up in files that will end up in offices where decisions get made quietly. The engineers stand frozen, caught between loyalty to their employer and the slow realization that maybe, just maybe, they've been building something broken for 6 years because someone decided fixing it was too expensive. Noemi takes one more step forward, pulling free from her mother's grip. She's small, barely 5 feet tall, thin in the way kids are when they grow too fast and don't eat enough. But when she speaks, her voice fills the room. I can fix it, she says. Right now, I can show you exactly what's wrong and how to correct it. But you already know I'm right. You knew the second I named the flaw. You knew because my father told you the same thing 5 years ago, and you ignored him. Hale's smile returns. Slow, cold, controlled. Prove it, he says. And Noemi walks toward the console. Would you step forward if everyone in the room wanted you to disappear? Noemi's hand hovers over the console. She doesn't touch it yet, just holds her fingers an inch above the screen, steady and still, like she's feeling for something the rest of the room can't see. The engineers watch her, with expressions caught between fascination and disbelief. The federal observers have stopped writing. Rosa stands frozen near the service entrance, hands pressed together like she's holding onto something fragile. Grayson Hale crosses his arms and waits. The older engineer, the one with the gray beard and 20 years of tenure, steps forward, voice tight. Sir, this is a classified defense system. We cannot allow an unauthorized minor to access. She's not accessing anything yet, Hale interrupts smoothly. She's thinking. Let her think. The engineer opens his mouth to argue, then thinks better of it. He steps back, but his hand stays on his tablet, ready to shut the whole thing down if Noemi so much as breathes wrong. Noemi doesn't notice. Or maybe she does, and she just doesn't care. Her eyes move across the screen, reading lines of code, tracking diagnostic readouts, mapping the system in her head the way some people memorize songs. She's done this before. Not here. Not with equipment this expensive. But she's done it. Her father made sure of that. Arturo Delgado didn't believe in theory. He believed in showing. In sitting beside his daughter at a kitchen table covered in motherboards and wire harnesses and old military surplus components he bought at salvage yards. He'd pull apart a power regulator and lay the pieces out in a line, explaining how each one worked, how they connected, where the weak points were. He didn't use textbooks, he used his hands. And Noemi watched. She watched him fix generators that contractors said were unsalvageable. She watched him rewire control systems in half the time it took certified engineers. She watched him flag problems that other people missed because he didn't just understand machines, he respected them. He knew that machines don't lie. They don't hide mistakes. They break for specific reasons, and if you're paying attention, They tell you exactly what's wrong. The problem, Arturo used to say, is that people don't want to listen. Noemi listens now. She tilts her head slightly, eyes narrowing at a section of code near the bottom of the screen. There, she says quietly. That's the secondary override. One of the younger engineers leans in, squinting. That's part of the safety dampener array. It's supposed to prevent thermal spikes. I know what it's supposed to do, Noemi replies. But it's doing something else. That's impossible. That subroutine has been tested. It's been tested in isolation, Noemi cuts in. Her voice stays calm, but there's an edge to it now. But you're not running it in isolation. You're running it parallel to a real-time stabilizer. Every time the stabilizer tries to correct a fluctuation, the dampener interprets it as a spike and overrides. Then the stabilizer compensates. Then the dampener overrides again. They're fighting each other. The compensator is the only thing absorbing the conflict, so it overheats. That's why your system crashes every 40 seconds after initialization. The younger engineer stares at the screen. His mouth opens, closes, opens again. That would mean the entire architecture is flawed. Yes, Noemi says simply. The room erupts. Not loud, not chaotic, but the tension breaks like a wire snapping under pressure. Engineers start talking over each other, voices rising, hands gesturing toward screens. The older engineer pulls up schematics on his tablet, scrolling fast, eyes widening as he cross-references the data. The federal observers exchange glances, then start writing again, faster this time. The colonel doesn't move. He just watches Noemi, expression unreadable. Hale watches too. But his focus isn't on the girl anymore. It's on the screens, on the diagnostic readouts, on the lines of code that suddenly make sense in a way they didn't 5 minutes ago, and on the memory surfacing in the back of his mind, a memory he's spent 5 years trying to forget. A contractor, army vet, quiet guy who kept his head down and did good work, filed a report about a feedback loop in the new energy control unit, sent follow-up emails when the report got ignored, requested a meeting with senior leadership to explain the flaw in detail. Arturo Delgado. Hale remembers now. He remembers the meeting that never happened. The report that got buried in a file marked low priority. The contractor who got let go 6 months later for reasons that sounded official but weren't. He remembers making the call himself, because fixing the flaw would have meant recalling units already in production. It would have meant admitting a mistake to the Department of Defense. It would have meant losing contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And Grayson Hale didn't build a billion-dollar empire by admitting mistakes. He built it by making problems disappear. Noemi turns away from the screen and looks directly at Hale. I can fix it, she says, but I need access to the firmware. The older engineer shakes his head immediately. Absolutely not. Firmware access requires clearance. We don't have authorization to grant. Then get authorization, Noemi replies. That could take days. Then your system will keep failing. Hale raises a hand, and the room goes silent. He steps forward slowly, hands sliding back into his pockets, posture relaxed in a way that makes Rosa's stomach twist. He stops in front of Noemi, looking down at her with an expression that's impossible to read. You're very confident, he says quietly. I'm right, Noemi replies. Confidence and correctness aren't the same thing. They are when you've done the math. Hale's smile returns. Sharp, cold, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Let me be very clear about what's happening here. You're 13 years old. You have no credentials, no clearance, no official standing, and you're asking me to grant you access to classified defense technology based on a theory. It's not a theory, Noemi says. It's a solution. The same solution my father gave you 5 years ago. The words hang in the air like smoke. Hale doesn't flinch, doesn't blink, doesn't react at all. But the colonel does. He takes one step closer, eyes locked on Hale's face, watching for the tell he knows is coming. And there it is. Just a flicker. Just a momentary tightness around Hale's mouth. Just enough to confirm what Noemi already said. He knew. He's always known. Hale turns to the older engineer. Give her access. The engineer's face goes pale. Sir, give her access, Hale repeats. Limited, supervised, logged, but give it to her. The engineer hesitates, then nods slowly. He taps his tablet, and the console in front of Noemi lights up with a new interface. Firmware controls. Deep system architecture. The kind of access that takes most engineers years to earn. Noemi doesn't hesitate. She reaches out, fingers moving across the screen, navigating through layers of code like she's walking through a house she's lived in her whole life. The engineers crowd closer, watching her work, murmuring to each other. Rosa presses her hand against her mouth, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. And Grayson Hale stands perfectly still, watching the girl who just called him a liar in front of federal observers and a decorated colonel. Watching the daughter of the man he destroyed. Watching her prove, in real time, that everything he buried is about to come back. Noemi's fingers stop moving. She taps one final command, then steps back. Run the initialization sequence, she says. The older engineer hesitates, then nods to one of the younger techs. Do it. The system hums to life. Monitors flicker. Indicators turn green, one by one, spreading across the display like dawn breaking. The energy control unit stabilizes. Holds. 30 seconds pass. Then 40. Then 60. No crash. No failure. No red lights. The room explodes into noise. Engineers rush forward, checking readouts, confirming data, voices overlapping in disbelief and relief. The federal observers write furiously. The colonel exhales for the first time in what feels like hours, and his hand finally releases the table. Rosa collapses against the wall, sobbing quietly. And Noemi just stands there, hands at her sides, watching the screens. Watching her father's work finally live the way it was always supposed to. Grayson Hale doesn't move. He just stares at the girl, and realizes he's made a mistake he can't bury. Have you ever fixed something so completely that the person who broke it couldn't look you in the eye? Arturo Delgado learned machines in the desert, not in a classroom, not from manuals or certification programs or PowerPoint slides projected onto whitewashed walls. He learned them in heat that turned metal too hot to touch and sand that got into every moving part. He learned them in places where failure meant more than missed deadlines or budget overruns. It meant people didn't come home. He was 23 when he enlisted, quiet kid from El Paso, who grew up taking apart lawnmowers and car engines in his uncle's garage. The recruiter saw potential, someone who understood systems, who could think under pressure, who didn't panic when things broke. They made him a field systems specialist, sent him overseas with a toolbox and orders to keep everything running no matter what. And Arturo did. He kept generators alive when temperatures hit 130. He rewired communications arrays during mortar fire. He rebuilt power systems with parts that were never designed to fit together but fit anyway because he made them. Other soldiers called him a miracle worker. Officers put him on priority response lists. When something broke, they sent Arturo. Because Arturo didn't just fix machines, he understood them. He understood that machines are honest. They don't lie about their limits. They break for specific, identifiable reasons. And if you pay attention, if you really listen, they tell you exactly what's wrong before they fail. The problem, Arturo realized early, wasn't the machines. It was the people who built them without listening. The contractors who cut corners. The engineers who designed systems in air-conditioned offices and never tested them in the field. The executives who signed off on equipment because it met budget requirements, not because it worked. Arturo saw soldiers suffer because of those decisions. He saw medics lose patience when cooling systems failed during evacuations. He saw convoys go dark because communication relays couldn't handle dust storms. He saw a 19-year-old private die from heat stroke inside a fortified tent because the climate control unit shut down and nobody could restart it in time. That was the day Arturo stopped being quiet. He started filing reports. Detailed ones. Technical breakdowns of every failure he witnessed. every design flaw he identified, every shortcut that put lives at risk. He sent them up the chain of command, submitted them to logistics officers, forwarded them to procurement divisions. And for a while, people listened. They thanked him for his diligence. They promised to forward his concerns to the appropriate departments. Then nothing changed. The same flawed systems kept getting deployed. The same contractors kept winning bids. The same equipment kept failing in the same predictable ways. And Arturo realized something that broke him more than the heat or the sand or the long nights holding tools with hands that shook from exhaustion. Nobody cared. Not because they were evil. Not because they wanted soldiers to die, but because fixing the problems was expensive. It meant recalling equipment, redesigning systems, admitting mistakes to Congress and the Department of Defense. It meant losing contracts and bonuses and quarterly earnings reports that kept stock prices high. So they buried the reports, and Arturo came home. He didn't talk much about what happened overseas. Not to Rosa, who he married 6 months after his discharge. Not to his daughter, who was born 2 years later in a hospital where the air conditioning worked and the lights stayed on. He got a job as a contract technician, civilian work, defense contractors who needed someone who understood military systems. The pay was decent. The hours were long. The work was familiar. And then he got hired by Halcyon Systems Group. At first, it felt like a good fit. They were developing energy control units for mobile command bases systems designed to keep soldiers safe in the field. Arturo worked on the prototypes, testing firmware, identifying weak points, making sure the units could handle real-world conditions. He was good at it, so good that the project lead started routing problems directly to him. That's when he found the flaw. It was buried deep in the code, a feedback loop between the stabilization subroutine and the safety dampener. The kind of mistake that wouldn't show up in lab testing because labs don't replicate field conditions. But Arturo knew. He'd seen enough systems fail under pressure to recognize the pattern. He ran simulations, confirmed the math, documented everything, and then he filed a report. He sent it to his supervisor, to the project lead, to the senior engineering team. He explained the flaw in detail, showed how the feedback loop would cause the compensator to overheat, predicted failure rates under operational stress, recommended a fix that would take 3 weeks and cost less than $500,000. The report disappeared. Arturo followed up, sent emails, requested meetings, escalated the issue to higher management. He wasn't angry. He wasn't trying to make trouble. He just wanted the system fixed before it got deployed. Before soldiers trusted their lives to equipment that wouldn't work when it mattered. Nobody responded. So he tried again, and again, and again, until one day, his supervisor called him into an office and told him his contract wasn't being renewed. Budget cuts, they said. Restructuring. Nothing personal. They thanked him for his service, both military and civilian, and escorted him out of the building. Arturo didn't fight it. He just left, but he took his notes with him. Every report, every email, every technical breakdown. He stored them in a folder on his laptop, backed them up on a flash drive, and kept them locked in a drawer beside his bed, because he knew that one day someone would need to see them. He just didn't know it would be his daughter. The illness started 3 years later. Lungs first, then kidneys, then liver. The doctors called it exposure-related. Chemicals, particulates, environmental toxins, absorbed over years of working in conditions that weren't designed for human safety. The VA denied his benefits twice, said his symptoms didn't match their criteria, said there wasn't enough documentation, said he should appeal. Arturo didn't have time to appeal, so he did something else. He taught Noemi. Every evening after Rosa left for her night shift cleaning office buildings, Arturo would pull out his old toolbox and spread components across the kitchen table. Motherboards, relays, firmware modules. He'd show Noemi how systems connected, how to read diagnostic codes, how to recognize patterns that meant something was about to fail. He didn't explain why. He didn't tell her about Halcyon, or the buried reports, or the soldiers who died because someone decided fixing a problem was too expensive. He just taught her to see machines the way he did, honestly, clearly, without looking away. And Noemi learned. She learned faster than Arturo expected. She asked questions he hadn't thought to answer. She found solutions he hadn't considered. And one night, when the pain got bad enough that he couldn't hide it anymore, Arturo sat his daughter down and told her everything. About the flaw, about the reports, about the men who buried them. He told her because he needed her to understand something. Machines don't fail randomly, he said, voice rough from medication and exhaustion. People make choices. And sometimes those choices hurt people who trusted them. If you ever get the chance to fix something, I couldn't. If you ever see that flaw again, don't stay quiet. Don't let them bury it. Speak up, even if nobody listens. Even if it costs you. Because the truth doesn't disappear just because people stop looking at it. It waits. And eventually, it finds a witness. Noemi promised. 16 months later, she kept that promise. Standing in a boardroom 42 floors above the city, surrounded by engineers who thought she didn't belong, and federal observers who didn't know her name, Noemi Delgado fixed the system her father died trying to save. And Grayson Hale, the man who buried the truth because it was expensive, stood frozen, watching the past walk back into his life through the daughter of the man he destroyed, watching her prove that some debts don't disappear. They just wait. And eventually, they demand payment. What would you sacrifice to finish something your father started? Noemi's hand moves. Not fast. Not theatrical. Just steady and certain. The way someone reaches for a light switch in a dark room they've walked through 1,000 times. Her fingers touch the console, and the room holds its breath. 12 engineers, 4 federal observers, 1 colonel with a prosthetic leg, 1 billionaire CEO, 1 mother pressed against the wall, praying in Spanish under her breath. All of them watching a 13-year-old girl rewrite code that cost $300 million to develop. The main display shifts. Lines of code scroll upward, too fast for most people to follow. But Noemi's eyes track every character. She's not guessing. She's not experimenting. She knows exactly what she's looking for because her father showed her. Not this specific system. Not this exact interface. But the logic underneath the architecture, the patterns, the way military contractors build redundancy on top of redundancy until the safety measures become the problem. Arturo taught her to see past the complexity, to find the simple truth buried underneath. And the truth is simple. The system is fighting itself. Noemi scrolls down 300 lines of code, stops, highlights a subroutine buried in the firmware. Her finger hovers over the delete command. The older engineer with the gray beard moves closer, squinting at the screen. That's the thermal override protocol. If you remove that, the system loses its primary safety. It doesn't need a primary safety. Noemi interrupts quietly. It needs the secondary dampener to stop conflicting with the stabilizer. The thermal override only exists because the compensator keeps overheating. Remove the conflict, and the override becomes unnecessary. The engineer opens his mouth, closes it, opens it again. That's not how we were taught to build failsafes. I know, Noemi says. That's why it doesn't work. She deletes the subroutine. Rosa's hand flies to her mouth. One of the federal observers leans forward, pen frozen above his clipboard. The younger engineers exchange glances, expressions caught between horror and fascination. Grayson Hale stands perfectly still, hands in his pockets, face unreadable. The system doesn't crash. The monitors stay green. The energy control unit hums softly, processing data, running calculations, doing exactly what it's supposed to do. 30 seconds pass. Then 40. Then 50. Nothing fails. Noemi scrolls deeper into the code, fingers moving across the screen like she's playing an instrument only she can hear. She adjusts one parameter, removes a redundant limiter, rewrites a logic sequence that was designed to prevent failures but actually caused them. Each change is small, precise, the kind of modification that looks obvious in hindsight but takes years of experience to recognize. Or, it takes a father who spent his last months teaching his daughter to see what other people missed. The colonel moves closer. He's not watching the screen anymore. He's watching Noemi, studying the way her eyes track the code, the way her hands move without hesitation, the way she breathes slowly and evenly like she's done this 100 times before. He's seen that kind of calm in the field, in soldiers who learned to work under pressure because their lives depended on it, in people who understand that panic is a luxury you can't afford when someone else is counting on you. Noemi makes one final adjustment. Her hand stops moving. She steps back from the console, eyes still locked on the display. "Run a full diagnostic," she says. The older engineer hesitates, then nods to one of the younger techs. "Comprehensive scan, all systems." The tech's fingers fly across his keyboard. The monitors shift, displaying diagnostic readouts, thermal maps, power distribution charts. Numbers scroll past, indicators flash. The system cycles through every operational parameter, testing itself against specifications that have failed 6 demonstrations in a row. 60 seconds pass, then 70, then 80. The diagnostic completes. Green across every display. 0 errors. 0 warnings. 0 failures. The room erupts in whispers. Engineers crowd the console, checking readouts, confirming data, voices overlapping in disbelief. The federal observers write furiously, filling pages with notes that will end up in reports that will end up in offices where decisions get made behind closed doors. The colonel exhales slowly, and for the first time since he walked into this boardroom, his shoulders drop. Rosa slides down the wall, knees buckling, hands covering her face as she cries. And Noemi just stands there, arms at her sides, watching the system. Her father died, trying to fix, finally work, the way it was always supposed to. Grayson Hale doesn't move. He stares at the screens, at the green indicators, at the diagnostic results that prove everything he buried 5 years ago was real. His face drains of color, not dramatically, not like someone in a movie, just a slow, creeping pallor that starts at his hairline and spreads downward until his lips press into a thin, bloodless line. Because he recognizes the fix. He recognizes the logic, the sequence, the exact solution Arturo Delgado proposed in 17 pages of technical documentation that Grayson Hale read, understood, and buried because implementing it would have cost contracts and credibility and quarterly earnings projections. And now it's displayed on every screen in the room, undeniable, irrefutable, witnessed by federal observers and a decorated colonel and 12 engineers who just watched a child accomplish what 3 senior teams couldn't. The older engineer turns to Hale, voice shaking. "Sir, this is extraordinary. We need to run extended trials. But if this holds..." Hale raises a hand. The engineer stops talking immediately. The room goes silent. Hale walks toward Noemi slowly, footsteps echoing against the polished floor. He stops 3 feet away, hands still in his pockets, expression empty. When he speaks, his voice is so quiet it barely reaches the federal observers standing 10 feet behind him. "You fixed it," he says. Noemi looks up at him. "Yes. Using your father's solution. Yes." Hale's jaw tightens. Just for a second. Just long enough for the colonel to see it. And then Grayson Hale turns and walks out of the boardroom without another word. No congratulations. No acknowledgement. No mention of the $100 million he promised in front of witnesses. He just leaves. The door closes behind him with a soft click that somehow sounds louder than any explosion. What kind of man walks away from the truth when it's standing right in front of him? The system stays green. Not just for minutes, for hours. The engineers run every test they can think of. Load simulations. Thermal stress analysis. Power fluctuation scenarios designed to replicate field conditions. They push the energy control unit harder than it would ever run in actual deployment, throwing variables at it that shouldn't exist outside laboratory extremes. And it doesn't fail. Not once. The federal observers watch every test. They document every result. They request copies of the modified firmware, the diagnostic logs, the complete technical breakdown of what Noemi changed and why it worked. The older engineer with the gray beard explains it 3 times, voice getting steadier each repetition, until he's speaking with something that sounds almost like pride. The colonel stands near the windows, arms crossed, staring out at the city below. He hasn't said much since Hale left. Just watched, listened, absorbed. Now he turns away from the glass and walks toward Rosa, who's still sitting against the wall, clutching her daughter's hand like she's afraid someone will take her away. He crouches down, bringing himself to eye level. The prosthetic leg makes a soft mechanical sound as he settles into position. "Ma'am," he says quietly. "My name is Colonel James Okonkwo. I served 3 tours overseas. I lost this leg because a climate control unit failed during an evacuation, and the heat made our pilot pass out mid-flight. We crashed. 4 people died. I lived because a field systems specialist kept the emergency power running long enough for rescue to find us." Rosa's eyes widen. Tears streak down her face, but she doesn't look away. Colonel Okonkwo glances at Noemi, then back at Rosa. "Your husband saved lives. More than you know. More than anyone will ever be able to count. And your daughter just proved he was right. That matters. It matters more than money. More than contracts. More than any of this." He stands slowly, joints protesting, and offers Rosa his hand. She takes it, lets him help her to her feet. Noemi stays close, watching the colonel with eyes that understand more than most 13-year-olds should have to. "Thank you," Rosa whispers. Colonel Okonkwo nods once, then turns to the federal observers. "I want a full investigation into Halcyon Systems' review process for contractor safety reports. I want to know who saw Arturo Delgado's warnings and why they were never implemented. And I want it on my desk in 30 days. One of the observers looks up from his clipboard. "Sir, that kind of audit requires—" "I don't care what it requires," Colonel Okonkwo cuts in. His voice doesn't rise, but the weight behind it makes everyone in the room straighten. Soldiers trusted this equipment. Some of them died because it didn't work. And we just found out that a veteran contractor identified the problem 5 years ago, and someone buried it. So yes, we're doing the audit. And yes, you're going to find out who made that decision." The observer swallows hard. "Yes, sir. The engineers have stopped working. They're all watching now, standing around the console like witnesses to something they don't fully understand yet but know is important." The younger tech, the one who ran the comprehensive diagnostics, speaks up, voice hesitant. "Sir, what about the girl? She fixed a system that's been failing for years. Shouldn't she?" "Shouldn't she what?" Colonel Okonkwo asks. The tech glances at Noemi, then back at the colonel. "I don't know. Receive recognition? Compensation? Something? She was promised $100 million, the older engineer adds quietly. "In front of everyone here. That's a binding verbal contract." Colonel Okonkwo's expression hardens. Grayson Hale made a lot of promises. To Congress, to the Department of Defense, to soldiers who trusted his equipment. He didn't keep those either. The room falls silent again. One of the federal observers closes his notebook. "We'll include the verbal contract in our report. Whether it's enforceable is up to the legal team, but it will be documented." Rosa's hand tightens around Noemi's. She knows what documented means. It means paperwork. It means lawyers. It means months or years of fighting people who have more money and more power and more patience than a cleaning woman and her daughter will ever have. It means nothing will happen. But Noemi doesn't look defeated. She looks tired, relieved, like she just set down something heavy she's been carrying for a long time. "I didn't do it for the money," she says quietly. Everyone turns to look at her. "I did it because my father was right," Noemi continues. "And because soldiers deserve to know the truth. That's all." Colonel Okonkwo studies her for a long moment, then nods slowly. Your father would be proud. Noemi's eyes fill with tears, but she doesn't cry. She just nods back. The Federal observers pack up their equipment. The engineers save the modified firmware, back up the diagnostic logs, document everything that happened in reports that will get read by people who weren't in the room but need to understand what occurred. The older engineer approaches Rosa before he leaves, handing her a business card. If you need anything, he says quietly. Legal advice, technical consultation, anything, call me. Rosa takes the card with shaking hands. Thank you. The boardroom empties slowly. Engineers first, then Federal observers, then the tech team who spent 6 hours running tests on a system that finally works. Colonel Okonkwo is the last to leave. He pauses at the door, looks back at Noemi one more time, and offers a small, respectful nod. Then he's gone. And Rosa and Noemi are alone in a room that smells like leather and steel and victory that doesn't feel like winning. Rosa pulls her daughter close, pressing her face into Noemi's hair, whispering prayers of gratitude and grief and relief. Noemi holds her mother tight, both of them crying now, both of them understanding that this moment, this impossible, terrifying, triumphant moment, changes everything and nothing at the same time. Because Grayson Hale is still a billionaire. Halcyon Systems is still a defense contractor with government connections and legal teams and resources that can bury truth as easily as breathing. And Arturo Delgado is still dead. But somewhere in a file on a Federal observer's laptop, in a colonel's memory, in firmware that will get deployed to soldiers who will never know the name of the man who saved them, the truth survives. And that, Noemi realizes, is what her father wanted all along. Not recognition, not revenge, just proof that speaking up matters. Even when nobody listens the first time. When you win without celebration, is it still a victory? Grayson Hale sits alone in his office. The lights are off. The city glows through floor-to-ceiling windows, 42 stories of distance between him and the people below. His hands rest flat on the desk, imported mahogany, custom made, worth more than most people earn in 5 years. The surface is empty, except for a laptop and a glass of scotch he poured 20 minutes ago and hasn't touched. His reflection stares back at him from the dark screen. He looks older than he did this morning. Not physically. Not in any way someone else would notice. But he feels it. The weight of years spent building an empire on decisions that seemed smart at the time. Practical. Necessary. The kind of choices that separate successful people from the ones who let emotion cloud judgment. Bury the report. Fire the contractor. Move forward. Protect the bottom line. Simple, clean, efficient. Except Arturo Delgado's daughter just walked into his boardroom and proved that buried things don't stay dead. They wait. Hale's phone vibrates. He ignores it. It vibrates again, then again. Messages flooding in from senior leadership, board members, investors who heard whispers about what happened during the demonstration. They want answers, explanations, assurances that the federal audit won't find anything damaging. Hale doesn't respond, because he knows exactly what the audit will find. Emails, suppressed reports, testimony from former contractors who were silenced the same way Arturo was. Paper trails that seemed invisible when they were buried but become obvious the moment someone starts looking. And now people are looking. Federal observers, a decorated colonel with personal reasons to care. Engineers who just watched a child fix what they couldn't. And somewhere in the building, maybe already gone, maybe still cleaning floors on a lower level, a woman who knows her husband died trying to protect soldiers, and a girl who just proved he was right. Hale's hand moves to the glass of scotch. He lifts it, stops, sets it down without drinking. His mind flashes back to the meeting he barely remembers. 5 years ago, a contractor requesting time to discuss a technical issue. Hale had read the report, skimmed it, really, and made the call quickly. Implementing the fix would have meant recalling units already in production, admitting a flaw to the Department of Defense, renegotiating contracts, losing millions in the short term for the possibility of saving lives in the long term. The math seemed obvious. Protect the company. Bury the report. Move on. Arturo Delgado disappeared from the schedule. The report disappeared from the system. The problem disappeared until it resurfaced in field failures that Halcyon blamed on operator error or extreme conditions or manufacturing defects in components sourced from subcontractors. Never their fault, never the design. And soldiers kept dying. Not many. Not enough to trigger investigations. Just enough to become statistics in reports that cited acceptable failure rates and operational risk tolerances and language designed to make death sound reasonable. Hale exhales slowly. He's not a monster. He's never thought of himself as cruel. He's a businessman. He makes decisions based on data, projections, stakeholder value. He's created jobs, built infrastructure, contributed to national defense. He's donated to veteran organizations, attended military galas, shaken hands with generals and senators, and people who praised his patriotism. But none of that matters now, because a 13-year-old girl just looked him in the eye and showed him the cost of every decision he thought he'd gotten away with. Not in dollars. Not in contracts. In a father who died trying to save people Hale never met. In a mother who cleans floors to survive. In a daughter who learned to see machines honestly because someone taught her that truth doesn't disappear just because powerful people stop looking at it. Hale's phone vibrates again. This time, he picks it up. Reads the message from his chief legal counsel. Federal audit confirmed. Need to discuss response strategy immediately. He sets the phone down. No response strategy will fix this. No lawyers can bury what Colonel Okonkwo just set in motion. No amount of money can erase the moment when Noemi Delgado fixed a system her father died trying to save, and every witness in that boardroom understood exactly what it meant. Hale stands slowly, walks to the window, looks down at the city below, millions of people living lives he'll never see, making choices he'll never know about, surviving in ways that don't require bulletproof glass and walnut-paneled war rooms. And somewhere down there, Rosa Delgado is taking her daughter home, to an apartment that costs a fraction of what Hale spends on scotch, to a life built on hard work and loss, and a father's memory that refuses to stay buried, to a future that just changed in ways neither of them can predict yet. Hale presses his forehead against the glass. It's cold, unyielding, honest in a way people never are, and for the first time in 30 years, Grayson Hale understands something he's spent his entire career avoiding. The truth doesn't negotiate. It just waits for someone brave enough to speak it. How long can you run from a debt you never planned to pay? The first audit notice arrives 3 weeks later. Not to Halcyon Systems Group. To Grayson Hale, personally. A formal letter from the Department of Defense Inspector General's office, requesting documentation related to contractor safety reports filed between 2018 and 2023. Specifically, reports concerning energy control systems deployed to mobile command bases. More specifically, any communications with or about Arturo Delgado. Hale's legal team responds with standard delays, requests for clarification, procedural objections, the usual tactics that buy time and exhaust investigators who have limited budgets and competing priorities. But Colonel Okonkwo doesn't exhaust easily. He makes calls, pulls favors, reaches out to other veterans who worked as contractors for Halcyon, and asks careful questions about their experiences. Some people don't want to talk, some are afraid. But some, the ones who left angry, the ones who filed complaints that went nowhere, the ones who watched good work get buried for bad reasons, those people talk. And their testimony builds a pattern of ignored warnings, suppressed reports, contractors who raised safety concerns and found themselves suddenly expendable, engineers who flagged design flaws and watched their careers stall, soldiers who survived equipment failures and wrote detailed incident reports that disappeared into filing systems designed to protect manufacturers, not users. The audit expands. From 1 investigator to 3. From 3 to 7. From a routine review to a formal investigation with subpoena power and media attention. News outlets start asking questions. Defense blogs publish leaked documents. Veterans organizations issue statements demanding accountability. Halcyon's stock price drops 11% in 2 weeks. Board members request emergency meetings. Investors demand explanations. Senior leadership starts talking about restructuring and independent reviews and policy reforms, all the language companies use when they're trying to contain damage they can't control anymore. Grayson Hale resigns, for health reasons, 4 months after Noemi Delgado fixed his broken system. The press release is brief, professional. It thanks him for his years of service and his contributions to national defense. It wishes him well in his future endeavors. It announces that the board will conduct a comprehensive search for new leadership committed to transparency and accountability. Nobody believes the health reasons part, but nobody challenges it either, because powerful people are allowed to leave quietly, even when everyone knows why they're really going. Halcyon Systems loses its largest government contract 6 weeks later. The Department of Defense cites reliability concerns and ongoing reviews of safety protocols, and the need to ensure operational integrity. The contract gets awarded to a smaller firm, one that employs several former Halcyon engineers who left years ago after their safety recommendations were ignored. The financial press calls it a stunning reversal. Veterans call it justice, slow and incomplete, but justice nonetheless. And in a small apartment 15 miles from Halcyon's headquarters, Rosa Delgado finds an envelope in her mailbox. No return address, just her name written in precise handwriting on expensive paper. She opens it carefully, hands shaking, while Noemi watches from the kitchen table where she's doing homework. Inside is a letter, short, formal, typed on letterhead from a law firm Rosa has never heard of. It informs her that Arturo Delgado established a trust fund 6 months before his death, that the trust was held in escrow pending the resolution of certain legal conditions, that those conditions have now been met, that the trust provides full funding for educational expenses, including tuition, books, housing, and living costs, for Noemi Delgado through completion of a doctorate degree in any field she chooses. Additionally, the letter continues, the trust includes provisions for legal representation, professional mentorship, and protection against retaliation or harassment related to testimony provided in federal investigations. The trust is irrevocable, fully funded, already active. Rosa reads the letter 3 times before she understands what it means. Arturo knew. He knew he wouldn't survive to see his daughter grow up. Knew his warnings would get buried. Knew that speaking the truth would cost him everything. But he also knew that truth doesn't die just because people stop listening. It waits, and eventually, it demands witnesses. So he prepared. He set aside money he couldn't afford to lose. He hired lawyers he couldn't afford to pay. He wrote instructions that wouldn't activate until someone proved what he tried to say was real. And then he died, trusting that one day somehow his daughter would get the chance he never did. Rosa collapses into a chair, letter pressed against her chest, sobbing so hard her whole body shakes. Noemi moves to her mother's side, arms wrapping around her, both of them crying for a man who loved them enough to protect them even after he was gone. Outside, the city continues. Traffic hums, lights glow. People move through their lives without knowing that a 13-year-old girl just inherited her father's fight and the means to finish it. And somewhere in a house bigger than Rosa and Noemi's entire apartment building, Grayson Hale sits alone, staring at a resignation letter he signed because staying would have meant watching everything he built collapse under the weight of truth he tried to bury. The investigations continue. The testimonies pile up. The evidence spreads across desks, in offices where decisions get made by people who never met Arturo Delgado but understand exactly what he tried to do. And slowly, painfully slowly, the system changes. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough that the next contractor who files a safety report might get heard instead of silenced. Enough that the next veteran who raises concerns might get protected instead of fired. Enough that the next soldier who trusts equipment with their life might actually survive because someone listened when it mattered. Rosa frames the letter, and hangs it on the wall beside a photo of Arturo in his uniform, smiling like he knew something nobody else could see yet. And Noemi goes back to her homework, studying engineering principles and system design and the mathematics of machines that don't lie, because her father taught her something more valuable than money. He taught her that integrity doesn't need permission, it just needs courage and time. What kind of man plans for justice he'll never live to see? 7 years pass. Noemi Delgado sits in a congressional hearing room, testimony prepared, hands folded on the table in front of her. She's 20 now. Engineering degree from Stanford, fully funded by the trust her father left behind. Internships at 3 defense contractors, none of them Halcyon. Recommendations from Colonel Okonkwo and 4 other decorated veterans who remember what she did in a boardroom when she was 13. She's not famous. Her name doesn't appear in news articles or industry journals, but in certain circles among veterans and field systems, specialists and engineers who take safety seriously, people know who she is. They know what she represents. Proof that speaking up matters, even when nobody listens the first time. The hearing room is smaller than Noemi expected. 20 seats for observers, most of them filled with congressional staffers and defense industry representatives and a few journalists covering military oversight issues. The committee sits at an elevated table, 5 senators studying prepared briefs and checking their phones between questions. Senator Patricia Kimani, Armed Services Committee, 12 years in office, former Air Force officer, looks up from her notes and addresses Noemi directly. Miss Delgado, you're here today to provide testimony regarding safety protocols in defense contracting, specifically related to how contractors handle technical reports from field specialists. Is that correct? Yes, ma'am, Noemi replies. Her voice is steady, confident, not the quiet tone of a child trying to be heard. The clear voice of someone who's learned that truth doesn't need volume, it just needs precision. Senator Kimani nods. Your written testimony references an incident at Halcyon Systems Group 7 years ago. Can you walk us through what happened? Noemi does. She explains the energy control system, the feedback loop, the 6 failed demonstrations, the reports her father filed, and the warnings that got buried. She describes the moment she fixed the flaw, using the exact solution Arturo Delgado proposed 5 years earlier. She details the federal audit that followed, the investigations that revealed a pattern of suppressed safety concerns, the contracts that were terminated because companies prioritized profit over protection. She speaks for 20 minutes without notes. When she finishes, the room is completely silent. Senator Kimani glances at her colleagues, then back at Noemi. Miss Delgado, you were 13 years old when this occurred. How did you have the technical knowledge to identify and fix a flaw that 3 teams of senior engineers missed? Noemi doesn't hesitate. My father taught me. He believed that people who understand systems have a responsibility to speak honestly about them. He believed that machines don't lie, but people do, and he believed that the truth doesn't disappear just because someone stops looking at it. It waits. And eventually, it finds someone brave enough to witness it. One of the senators, younger man, first term, leans forward. Your father passed away before he could see his warnings taken seriously. That must have been difficult. Yes, Noemi says quietly. But he prepared for it. He knew his testimony might not matter in his lifetime, so he made sure I'd have the resources to continue what he started. He established a trust fund. He connected me with mentors. He documented everything, not because he wanted revenge, but because he wanted soldiers to be safe. That was always the goal. Safety, not recognition, not compensation, just making sure the people who trust this equipment don't die because someone decided fixing a problem was too expensive. The room stays silent. Senator Kimani writes something in her notes, then looks up. What would you say to other contractors, engineers, field specialists, technical advisors who see safety issues but are afraid to report them? Noemi takes a breath, thinks about her father sitting at a kitchen table, spreading components across worn wood, teaching her to see machines honestly. Thinks about Rosa cleaning floors to keep them alive. Thinks about Colonel Okonkwo and the soldiers who died because equipment failed and backup never came. I'd say your silence has a cost, Noemi answers. Not just for you, for people who will never know your name, but whose lives depend on systems you understand better than anyone else. Speaking up is hard. It might cost your job. It might cost your reputation. But staying silent costs something too. And you're not the one who pays that price. Soldiers do. Their families do. People who trusted that someone like you would tell the truth when it mattered. She pauses, then adds quietly, "My father paid that price. But he spoke anyway, because he believed integrity doesn't need permission. It just needs courage. And time." Senator Kimani nods slowly. "Thank you, Miss Delgado. Your testimony will be included in our review of current safety reporting protocols. We're also recommending legislation that would protect contractors from retaliation when they raise concerns about defense systems. It won't undo what happened to your father, but maybe it will prevent it from happening to someone else. That's all he wanted," Noemi says. "Thank you." The hearing continues for another hour. Other witnesses testify. Defense contractors present policy reforms. Veterans advocates discuss gaps in oversight. But the moment everyone remembers the quote that ends up in news articles and committee reports is Noemi Delgado explaining that integrity doesn't need permission. The hearing adjourns at 4:30. Noemi gathers her notes, stands, and turns toward the exit. That's when she sees him, Grayson Hale, sitting in the back row of the observation section. Not hiding, not trying to avoid notice, just sitting there, hands folded in his lap, watching. He looks older, grayer, thinner in a way that suggests stress rather than health. His suit is expensive, but it doesn't fit the same way it used to. He's not a billionaire CEO anymore, just a man who resigned in disgrace and spent 7 years watching the empire he built get dismantled piece by piece. Their eyes meet. Noemi doesn't look away, doesn't flinch, just holds his gaze for 3 long seconds. And Grayson Hale, the man who once sneered at a child and promised $100 million he never paid, drops his eyes first. Noemi walks past him without speaking, because there's nothing left to say. The truth already spoke for itself. Outside the hearing room, Rosa waits. She's wearing a new dress, nothing expensive, but clean and professional, and she's holding a folder containing documents from the trust fund, scholarship confirmations, acceptance letters from graduate programs that want Noemi to continue her work in defense system safety. Mother and daughter embrace, holding tight, holding grateful, holding on to the memory of a man who loved them enough to fight battles he knew he'd never win. "He'd be proud," Rosa whispers. "I know," Noemi replies. They walk out together into sunlight that feels warmer than it should for November. Behind them, the hearing room empties. Senators return to their offices. Journalists file stories. Defense contractors adjust policies that might actually protect the next person who speaks up. And somewhere in that building, sitting alone in a row of empty seats, Grayson Hale understands something he spent 7 years trying to avoid. You can't outrun the truth. You can only decide whether you'll face it with dignity or watch it destroy everything you built while you hide. He chose hiding. And now he sits in silence, listening to the echo of a voice he tried to ignore 7 years ago. A voice that waited. A voice that found witnesses. A voice that changed everything by refusing to disappear. The truth doesn't negotiate. It just wins. Eventually, how many lives can one person's courage save?